I'm Jack Weinstein, president of Augusta Jewish Museum, and I have Robin Dudley here with me, who speaks better than me, so I'm going to turn it over here. But thank you all for coming to this program.
Thank you, Jack Weinstein. Good afternoon and shalom to everybody. Welcome to another quality program from the Augusta Jewish Museum, and our program today is called Hope in Times of Hate, which will explore the impact of hate, bigotry, racism, anti-Semitism, and other forms of intolerance, and how our communities can be prepared. Also, welcome to our guests watching on the AJM YouTube channel online. Please use the chat for questions and comments. As a courtesy to our panelists and our audience, please silence your cell phones now. There is a restroom at the back of this room. At the completion of the program, please return your feedback forms to the front table and join the panelists and board members right next door across the parking lot to the AJM Education Center for a reception and tours of the historic buildings. AJM hopes to be fully open to the public by early 2023, but in the meantime, we have these monthly programs. I'm Robin Wittenberg Dudley, a community volunteer here with Jack Weinstein, AJM Board President. We are delighted you are here. Look for any volunteers to answer your questions, and we'd like to thank our volunteer Girl Scout Troop 20131 from the Greater Clarks Hill service area, and also our museum volunteers. Also, there is a reading list of resources, relevant resources, which has been prepared by the Augusta-Richmond County Library System. That reading list is available online, and if you look at the program, which hopefully you all now have a program that was handed out, on the back of it is a QR code and a website, and that will take you to the reading list of resources. Please visit our AJM website to donate, volunteer, or sign up for future newsletters and events. AJM's next event will be our display at Arts in the Heart, which is September 16 through 18, and we'll be at booth 950 near Rubin's 1898 department store. If you are a civic leader, please stand up to be recognized, and thank you for your public service. Civic leaders. Is Miss Augusta here? Miss Augusta? Welcome.
Because something happened with our camera, if they go to our YouTube page.
And now I'd like to present our moderators and AJM board members, Nathan Jollis and Judy Geary. They will explain today's format, give introductions, and make sure that the panelists adhere to the time limit restrictions. Let me say that again, time limit restrictions. Our goal is to be out of here by 3:15 or 3:30 so that we can walk across and have the reception, and you'll have a chance to talk with the panelists next door at the AJM. Yes, I mentioned about the feedback form, which is very important to the Augusta Jewish Museum as we keep track of our programs. It looks like this, and it has Hope in Times of Hate. If you do not have a form, the feedback form, please raise your hand and Susan Steinberg will give you one. That form is also available online for the people that are streaming through YouTube, and you'll also get an online link with a follow-up email. This program is being recorded and will be archived on the AJM YouTube site. So later on, if you want to go back and hear any from our panelists, you'll be able to do that. Thank you again for joining us today.
It's good to see everyone here this afternoon. I hope everyone can hear me. Before we get started, just briefly to tell you about the format. Each speaker today will have approximately 8 to 10 minutes to share with you their thoughts about what's going on in our country today and what we can do to combat those things. And then we'll open it up for a Q&A, and we'll have somebody going around the room with a microphone. You'll just wave at them if you do have a question you'd like to direct to one or more of our panelists. Before I introduce our first speaker, just to put things a little bit in perspective, there's the church in Charleston, a march in Charlottesville, a synagogue in Pittsburgh, and a supermarket in Buffalo. It seems like today evil is all around us and very pervasive, I should say. Yet today's program, as you will note, is called Hope in the Time of Hate. And so we want it also to be about hope, what we can do. To consider what we're doing today, just think, young Anne Frank, during the darkest days of the Holocaust, was hiding with her family from the Nazis in the Holocaust. And in her diary she wrote, and I quote, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." I share those same sentiments of Anne's belief in the goodness of most people and in the goodness of our society. But yet, it is still our mission at the AJM to work and do what we can to overcome apathy, indifference, and misinformation in our society. And that requires dialogue, and so that brings us here today. Our first speaker today comes to us from the Columbia County District Attorney's Office, the Honorable Bobby Christine. Bobby is a graduate of the University of Georgia undergraduate, went on to Samford's University Cumberland School of Law in Birmingham, Alabama. He was in the military. I lost my place here. Excuse me 1 minute. But Bobby had multiple tours of duty in Iraq. Later he came back to Augusta, was appointed judge of the magistrate court for Columbia County. Later became chief magistrate of the Columbia County Magistrate Court. He's also been in private practice. He went on in 2017 and was appointed as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Georgia, and in 2021 was also named acting U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia, thus becoming one of the only U.S. attorneys in history to lead 2 districts at one time. Another very fascinating thing about Bobby that I'd like to share with you is he is one of only a very few prosecutors in the state of Georgia who ever got a conviction for murder when the body had not been found. That's very, very unique and very, very rare. But he brings to us today a lot of information from his office and about what we can do to combat hate, bigotry, and anti-Semitism. So if you would give a warm welcome to the Honorable Bobby Christine.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you to the AJM for having me and distinguished members of the panel. You all are a much brighter group since I left the table. And I look forward to hearing from you all and what you have to add. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my peer, Jared Williams, the district attorney from Augusta, a good friend and a good man. And I am certain that he would join us in the emotional effort that we're much different, but he and I partner on many things because our objective is the same. In that regard, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about initiatives to try to keep our community safe. And I think the first thing we need to observe, the work of the AJM really kind of highlights it, the preservation of these wonderful historic buildings. But more than just being old buildings, they evidence a time when Augusta got it right. Think about the 1860s and this becoming the first manifestation, the first real manifestation of a faith group, quite frankly, dissimilar from much of its surrounding, and yet it still stands. And so hats off to the efforts to keep it standing, to interpret that rich history and bring us the evidence of that history. I think it's a duty our generation has to keep it the way it is. So I was raised in Augusta, brought here by a retiring military officer. He had not been stationed here, but he visited here after my father came back from Vietnam with some horrible injuries. And he chose this community, and that speaks volumes about this community. Now, he would confess, were he still alive to tell you today, it was a bit alien, an Italian Catholic from Western Pennsylvania coming here, and felt a bit like a fish out of water. But it was actually members of the Jewish community in Augusta who first embraced my father. They had a common similarity from having moved from elsewhere to a land that was different. He would, were he here, say, my family has a vested interest, not only because I took an oath to address crime in any form, but a vested interest. It was my parents who taught me at a young age to abhor violence based on hate. The largest one-day lynching of Americans in American history in the late 1800s, 1891, in New Orleans, was actually the lynching of 11 Italian Americans. Some of their number had been acquitted at a trial, and the mob broke in to the jail and lynched 11 men at one time. And I don't suggest for a moment that that does not pale in comparison to other events that faith communities and ethnic communities have suffered. But it is a punctuation that I bring back to the buildings that are here preserved, is that Augusta, in large measure, relative to the Jewish community, doesn't have that stain. And it's incumbent upon us to observe that and redouble our efforts in a time to prevent that sort of stain now, during our tenure. We owe that to not only our posterity, but those who permitted us to inherit this community. Recently, you may have seen in the AJC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, recently in the AJC, recently you may have seen in the AJC an article where in Midtown, swastikas were painted on a particular crosswalk, and it drew a good bit of attention. It's akin to what we in the military might call a rapid reaction force, a quick reaction force jumped on. And that's very good in symbology, and I applaud that effort. But I suggest in Augusta we have a little bit tougher job, because we have residents in this community, the seeds of a problem. Now, we have legislation frequently referred to over the last year or two as an outgrowth of the Ahmaud Arbery case. Our Georgia legislature passed a piece of hate crimes legislation. And essentially, it's what we in the law call a sentence enhancer. if a crime is committed and the motivation for that crime is hate based upon religion or ethnicity or membership in a group, perhaps that group is because of a disability or other identifying characteristic, a sentencing judge can enhance a sentence. And I applaud that effort of the Georgia legislature. But if you drill down on it, you realize it is not a statute that prosecutes because of hate. It is not a hate crime in that it makes hate illegal. It is an enhancement. So if I were the victim of a crime and it were proved to a jury or a trier of the fact that the crime were motivated by hate, the sentence I receive, or the sentence the defendant receives because of the committed crime, maybe it's a battery, maybe it's a shooting, that sentence could be increased. But it is not a crime in and of itself. And I just shared that with you, not as a criticism, but we throw the term hate crime around a lot. And this piece of legislation has been labeled a hate crime legislation. It's really not. It's a sentence enhancer. And so I would suggest from that it begs further discussion in our legislature about, is it a tool in and of itself that is sufficient? I won't belabor you with all the information, and quite frankly, as a former U.S. attorney, I'm not allowed to talk about all the information. But I was the guy that stumbled, literally stumbled across the Ahmaud Arbery case. And I submit to you that case would not have been prosecuted federally but for my tenure there. And an excellent team. In fact, the lawyer that tried that case for the Department of Justice lives in our community. She did wonderful work. But it wasn't a fire bell in the night. It did not attract the attention that in retrospect we all observed it should have when it occurred. Otherwise it wouldn't have been there for months before I stumbled across it. It would have been on the front page. It would have been on the forefront of every law enforcement officer's mind had we a different conversation going on at that time. And I share that with you to get to my next point, which is, say, you two, or I got two more? Two more. That when we talk about hate, I ask the folks in this room and all the people with whom you have influence, through your families, through your church communities, through your work, through your religious communities, to observe that the real hate crime legislation we have in Georgia is the Anti-Terrorism and Criminal Street Gang Act. And let me ask you to take a mental leap that most prosecutors have not yet realized, is that gangs, or criminal gangs, are organized initially around ethnicity, a mythology about their ethnicity, and we call them colors. They only wear certain colors, right? It's like a uniform. And where, we don't have to go back too far in history, particularly European history, to understand the outcome when a community observes and permits organization around ethnicity, a mythology about that ethnicity, and adopting uniforms and instilling discipline. MS-13, I will give you this as an example. MS-13, it's actually an El Salvadorian-based criminal enterprise. And they disproportionately commit acts of violence against the African American community. You have to really drill down into a lot of these organized criminal gangs to understand some of the motivations. I prosecuted the largest prosecution in federal history at the time against the Ghostface gangsters, a white supremacist gang. But let me tell you, its organization and structure is repeated across the spectrum in these gangs. In California, if you look at the statistical analysis of the Norteños, a Mexican-based gang, look at who their victims are disproportionately. You will observe that criminal street gang activity is the greatest threat if we want to observe who is out there perpetrating hate crimes. The biggest organizers and perpetrators of hate crimes are organized gangs. And those gangs present the biggest threat to us. I will share with you, as I sit down, that the recent appearance of hateful propaganda dropped on some people's doorsteps not too terribly long ago, for me, like I said earlier, is a fire bell in the night. And so not only do we participate in public forums like this to share education, we put resources in those directions. And I won't go into specifics of ongoing investigations, but I will tell you that the law enforcement agencies in our community, McDuffie, Lincoln, Columbia County, Richmond County, Burke County, we work in concert because we are not spending time talking about the handful of areas we might disagree on an approach. We are concentrating on those points we have in common and preventing violent crime and crime based in hate is an objective of all of ours. And were he here, I am certain my peer and good friend Jared Williams would share the same with you. I will stick around, not only to learn from fellow panel members, but also in case you have any questions. That is a big topic I touched on, but I will tell you that from what I'm observing, both in the military, I'm still playing on part-time, both in the military and in my civilian capacity, criminal enterprises organized around ethnicity are the largest threats for the perpetration of hate crimes we see in our midst. I believe that to be true. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. I will introduce our next speaker, Mr. Robert Wittgenstein, who is representing the Anti-Defamation League Southeast Region. He's on board of the ADL. The ADL is a leading anti-hate organization that has been around since 1913, and I'm sure Mr. Wittgenstein will tell you more about it. Just to tell you a little bit about him, his family, his great-great-grandparents settled in Georgia before the Civil War and were founding members of the famous temple in Atlanta. His father is also very famous, Mr. Charles Wittgenstein, was the Southern Civil Rights Director of the Legal Counsel for ADL, and one of his great accomplishments has been to procure a pardon for Leo Frank. The only Jew was lynched in America. He also worked hard to unmask the work of the Klan. Mr. Wittgenstein has been on the ADL board and executive board and chaired the ADL Southeast Region Civil Rights Committee for 4 years. He has been on the team who worked to secure the passage of the Georgia hate crime statute in 2020 that was just mentioned. He also serves on the Georgia Commission on the Holocaust and Executive Board, and is a past president of Temple Emmanuel in Sandy Spring.
Thank you. It never fails that I end up having to follow the courtroom lawyer who is accustomed to speaking in front of groups of people. First, I do want to thank the AJM for arranging this and for inviting us today. The Anti-Defamation League, as you just heard, was founded in 1913. And it was founded because as a reaction to a recent outpouring of anti-Semitic incidents in the United States, and triggered in part by the lynching of Leo Frank in Marietta, Georgia. Leo Frank was a Jew from New York who'd come down here and had become a factory manager, and he was accused of violently raping and killing a 13-year-old girl. His trial in Atlanta was a show trial. He was initially not a suspect, but there was a very ambitious district attorney who turned this into a show trial. And throughout the trial, there were people in the streets chanting, "Hang the Jew, hang the Jew, hang the Jew." At the end of the trial, the mood in the courtroom and on the streets was so extreme that the judge said that the prisoner couldn't be in the courtroom because it was too dangerous to actually be present for the reading of the verdict. Eventually, the governor of Georgia, Governor Slayton, had serious questions about whether or not justice had been served, and he commuted Frank's sentence from death to life in prison to give him the opportunity to file appeals. And after that, a group of leading citizens from Cobb County went down to the prison in Reidsville. They knocked on the door, they were let in, they were shown to Leo Frank's cell, and they were let in. And Leo Frank was then taken back to Cobb County and lynched. And Jews at the time, this was reminiscent of the pogroms from the old country, right? There was this sense that we had left all of that behind. And much of that was shattered with the death of Leo Frank. So ADL was founded with two missions: fight for Jews and to secure justice and fair treatment for all. And there was, even then as there is today, the sense that those two missions are intertwined, that we can't fight for justice for Jews without fighting for all people. And so we continue to do that. As was mentioned, ADL led the fight in the legislature for the hate crimes bill, which is a penalty enhancement bill, deliberately, because we did not want to try and legislate what is hate and try to criminalize someone's opportunity to voice opinions. But what we did want to do was to recognize the difference between somebody spray painting on the side of a warehouse, "Jimmy loves Sally," and somebody spray painting on the side of a synagogue, "All Jews must die." They're both vandalism. But one of them targets a piece of property, and the other targets an entire community. And we needed the court to have a mechanism to recognize that the sentences should not be the same for those two crimes. So let me spend just a second to talk about anti-Semitic activity in Georgia. ADL is one of the organizations that does an annual audit of anti-Semitic activity throughout the country, and we have statistics for Georgia. Georgia saw an increase of 133% of anti-Semitic incidents in 2021. From 49, the year before it was 21. So we had 49 instances that were reported of anti-Semitic activity. 17 of those involved vandalism in schools. So let's think about that. Over half the incidents of anti-Semitism occurred in Georgia schools. And that tells us that we have a lot of work to do in the school system. And so we talk about this being about hope. So one of the things that we should take away from this is that there are things that we can be doing in our schools. And ADL and several other organizations, I think NAACP has it as well, have programs that implement anti-bias and diversity and inclusion and anti-bullying programs, which you can implement here in Augusta. These are teacher-led and school-led things. This isn't somebody coming in from Atlanta to tell you how to fight prejudice. This is schools sitting down and having discussions about what should we do, where are our problems, what can we do, and then creating programs that they then run and monitor themselves. So I invite the Augusta community to work with the ADL office in Atlanta to implement the No Place for Hate program here in Augusta. One of the other things that we do that we're very proud of is our training of law enforcement. So the ability to have law enforcement that understands how to avoid profiling and how to allow people to retain their rights and how to have a criminal justice system which is fair for everybody is an incredibly important way that we can further the cause of justice and get police to be in a position where they are helping protect rather than helping to persecute. And we all know that the vast majority of law enforcement officers today are dedicated, they are committed, and they are good at their jobs. One of the ways that that happens is through training. And so again, if we're looking for things to do from here on out, working with the community to help train law enforcement is something we can do to help further the cause. The last thing I want to say is that if there are incidences of anti-Semitism in your community, you need to let ADL know. We are your second call. Your first call is 911, right? But we're your second call. We track instances. We provide support for families. We often go in to places where anti-Semitism has manifested itself and worked with administrators or worked with clergy. We are there to provide resources to respond to anti-Semitism. I'd like to say that we really do work in three places. We work in the schoolhouse, we work in the courthouse, and we work in the state house. And between those three places, our role is to take us from where we were to where we need to be. And one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. is that the arc of justice, the arc of history bends towards justice. So we are in a better place today than we've ever been, despite the increases that we've seen in racial crimes and anti-Semitism. When we look back generationally, this is the best it's ever been here in America, and we should be very thankful for that, and I thank you for your attention.
Our next speaker today is Eugene White. He was born in New York City and as a youth moved to Aiken, South Carolina with his parents. He graduated from the University of Washington, went on and got his MBA from Duke University. After school, he spent a considerable period of time in Costa Rica and Latin America dealing with energy and research and ecology, amongst other things. He came back to Aiken, settled in, and became the president of the Aiken County branch of the NAACP. His guiding mantra as branch president is make it fair for everyone, and they have three foundational tenets for what's considered to be a great society: education, public safety, and business and commercial relations. And for all of his work in the Aiken community, most recently in 2020, the Aiken Standard named him as its Citizen of the Year. Without further ado, I present to you Eugene White.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to join you on this afternoon. Y saludos a mis amigos del evento de ayer. I'm a little out of sorts because I've been on several panels this week and I was always the last person to speak. So you get an advantage when you're the last person to speak because all you got to do is say ditto and amen and then you're off the hook. But this isn't the case today. Hate is wrong and must be defeated. Hate is wrong and must be defeated. Let's start the clock so I make sure I don't get out of order here. I serve as the president of the Aiken County branch of the NAACP, the oldest and largest civil rights organization in the United States. Our mission is to eliminate hate-based discrimination everywhere and to preserve the social, political, economic, and educational rights of all people. We've had a strong relationship with the Jewish community because from our very beginning, we've stood arm in arm with that Jewish community. If you look at pictures of our founders, you don't see many people that look like me, but you certainly see other people that look like they come from the Jewish community. And that's great, because from the very beginning, we have started working together. My personal story is that I have an aunt who's Jewish. Love her very much, and she loves me as well, and so my cousins are Jewish, and so whenever I'm in Boston during the high holidays, it's obligatory to go to Temple Israel to join in those festivities there. And so from coming up and being raised, I also was being introduced and embraced by that community, and so love what we do there. In Aiken County, as we mentioned in the introduction, the things that we feel like are instrumental to a great society that works together are three basic fundamental tenets. And that sort of serves as our guiding rudder as we do the work of the NAACP. Number one, we're for education, because we believe that education is the closest thing that we have to magic. Abracadabra. Because with a little bit of education, one not only can change their lives, but they can change their families' lives, and in turn, they end up changing their communities' lives. And how powerful is that? Going on to the next step, economic empowerment. Because with that education now, the door opens to economic opportunities. Not just going to work for somebody, but also entering into the world of entrepreneurship and working for yourself. And so ensuring that those barriers to entry to entrepreneurships and that folks with those educations can find jobs that pay livable wages, then that's what we do to kind of move that equation forward in the community now as we're starting to look for equal rights and fair representation, and again, defeating the hate. And that final piece is public safety, because we all have the right to walk the streets in safe communities. And that doesn't rest on the shoulders of great individuals like Attorney Christine, but public safety is all of our responsibility. And we have to all work together in order to ensure that public safety reigns in our community. And so with those three things in place now, our mantra for the Aiken County branch of the NAACP is make it fair for everybody. And I think that that's something that we all can get behind. We intentionally chose that mantra because we think that, again, this work in lifting a community isn't something that we do in a silo, but it takes all of us sort of to work together, like the NAACP has worked with the Jewish community, like we work with the Latino community, as we work with all the communities in order to help us get the job done. And kind of backing up again and sharing this framework is that, I personally believe that there's sort of three lanes that we run in as a community. There's a faith community, an advocacy and civil rights community, and a business commerce community. And when you get those three lanes running like they should be, then you have the opportunity to really change a community into what you really imagine it to be. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal with certain unalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And those are the words that I hang my hat on, particularly that pursuit of happiness. Because when we look in today's environment, we see that there's a strong attack on this life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Three fundamental things that sociologists and political scientists say when they're looking at how an economy or how a society is moving is that they say, if number one, we stop believing in the results of election. Number two, we start to embrace violence and rhetoric, and we start to slam and criticize our press. And number three, when good people stop denouncing one and two, then a society is on its way to ruin. This isn't the first time we're playing this game, folks. Empires have risen and empires have fallen here in this world, and right now it is our job, and we are on the watch, and we are on the wall to ensure that our world does not move in that direction. I was at an event on yesterday. We were celebrating various communities coming together, particularly as it relates to dancing. There was an ethnic dance that was there, and so one of the comments that I made was if you take two babies and you put them in a room together, and you start to play music, after a little while, those babies are going to start to move to the rhythm. And then eventually they're going to start to dance and they're going to start to play together. So if you can take those babies who can play and move together without respect to race, class, or religion, how much more should we be able to do that as adults? And that's our challenge today, to maintain that hope. Because that hope is a seed. Because if we lose seed, there'll be no tree that springs forward in which we can all rest under the shade of that peace one day. So the first thing that we can do, as we hope, we gotta keep trucking. It's very easy to become apathetic, to say that elections don't matter, that my vote doesn't count, that they're all crooks and they're all corrupt anyway and they don't want to do anything for us. I answer questions like that on panels all the time, and my answer to those folks who ask those questions is keep trucking. You gotta continue to show up for each and every election. You gotta continue to come to events like this. You gotta continue to lock arms with people who don't look like you. You gotta continue to stay in the fight and do the work. Because if those who came before us didn't do the work, then we wouldn't have the opportunity to be here and share in this forum that we're having today. People ask me, what can you do? Here's a couple things. Number one, vote in each and every election, folks. And encourage everyone in your circle to vote in those elections, which is much tougher than people say, right? Because lots of people don't have faith in the system anymore. My vote doesn't count. They're gonna rig it and do how they want to. You all gotta show up and vote, and it's not just the presidential election, it's these local elections that really make the difference. Number two, join organizations that are out there doing the work. All of them are different, they're made up of different ways, they have different goals, but if you find one that fits for you, and I'm certain that there is one that fits for you, hop on board and volunteer your head, your heart, and your hands to get involved. We have a saying at my church. When something happens, you can do three things. You can pay, you can pray, or you can go. So if you aren't one that can go and do the work, make sure you pay. If you're one who can do the work, get out there and go. And of course, we all need prayers, so make sure that you have those prayers and lifting up the people who are actually out there doing the work. As you join, number three, those organizations that are out there doing the work. Whenever there's an volunteer opportunity, and we're all short on people, make sure that you are in there volunteering, particularly as it relates to voter registration and voter education. If there's a call to get out and do voter registration, your hand needs to be straight to the top and straight up if you are serious about eliminating hate and having hope in these times of crisis. In closing, imagine a world in which all these babies are dancing together. And all of us are dancing together, each in our corner, not forgetting who we are, where we come from. We've got the African drums in this corner, we've got the salsa in this corner, we've got the rock in this corner, but we're all blending it together perfectly to make a symphonic sound. That's the world that we can have, folks. But it's going to take the work, it's going to take the hope, it's going to take the votes, and it's going to take just a bit of courage and standing up when you see that something is wrong. Each and every one of us every day have the opportunity to make a difference because we all hear things. Sometimes, and most of the times, we decide not to say anything, we just let it pass, but we gotta have the bravery and the courage to stand up and say, that's not who I am, that's not who I want my community to be, and I'm not going to let you continue down that road in my presence. One verse that certainly helps me as I take my seat comes from the Old Testament, in which the great leader Moses is dead and Joshua has taken his place. And he's told by the great Creator, be strong and courageous, for remember the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And as I take my seat, community, remember the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce next Nicky Spivak. He has been in Augusta for less than 2 months. Came to us from Scottsdale. He is the executive director of the Jewish Community Center Federation of Augusta and brings a wealth of Jewish professional experience to us. A lot of his experience was on college campuses, on Hillel, the Jewish organizations on campuses, and several in Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati, Miami University, Ohio, and Tampa Bay in South Florida. He was the executive director of the Congregation Or Zion in Scottsdale, where he came from. He grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and graduated from the University of Louisville. Without further ado, Nikki, I welcome you.
Thank you, Judy. And first, like everyone else has said, thank you to the Augusta Jewish Museum for sponsoring and hosting this important discussion. Particular thanks to Robin Dudley and all of the volunteers here at the museum that make these types of programs come together. Also, thank you to my fellow panelists. Being new to the community, it is beneficial for me to hear and understand everything that others are doing to stop racism, acts of hatred, and anti-Semitism in the CSRA. As I've mentioned, and as Judy mentioned, I've only been here a short time, about 6 weeks. I will share with you what I know has been done in the Jewish community to build connections with other multicultural and interfaith communities in the area. But first, as was mentioned, I'd like to touch on hatred that takes place on our university campuses. I spent 16 years working with Jewish campus communities as a Hillel professional. Hillel is the Jewish international organization that provides support to our young adults as they study at colleges. We heard about incidents that take place in our school system. College campuses are also the targets of anti-Semitism, hate speech, and discrimination towards all races and LGBTQ communities. I recently read an article in the Atlanta Jewish Times about the campuses with the most virulent anti-Semitic culture. These include Florida State, Arizona State, UCLA, University of Michigan, Rutgers, and the University of Minnesota. These are large campuses in different parts of the country with huge Jewish student populations. Much of the anti-Semitism that takes place is anti-Israel in nature. The BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanction movements began on different campuses. And student groups such as Students for Justice in Palestine promote a false narrative that Israel is an illegitimate colonial state. It is not all anti-Israel. Recently at Yale University, there were signs posted on campus and near the hospital that said, "Yale is a Jew hole. Let's round them up." In my time on college campuses, I worked closely with the university administration, different departments within the university, campus police, the multicultural campus community, and the campus ministry interfaith groups to provide, as was mentioned before, education, open dialogue, and support for others to fix discriminatory practices on campus. That support and collaboration was a two-way street. If the Jewish campus community needed something, we had partners ready to stand with us. That same cooperation is crucial for our community as well. Locally, in the short time, here's what I've learned. Recently, two of the Jewish organizations, the Augusta Jewish Community Center and the Jewish Federation of Augusta, have merged into one organization. One of the functions is the Jewish Community Relations Council. Among other missions, the JCRC works to build relationships with interfaith and multicultural communities, to provide educational events, advocacy programs, social action projects to benefit the entire community. In addition to the JCRC, I have become involved with Interfaith Fellowship of Augusta. It's a group of people from all faiths and backgrounds to promote a better understanding and support for each faith's efforts to assist in the overall community. I'm also aware that our local synagogues, AYS, and we'll hear from Rabbi Searle in a moment, CCI, and Chabad have participated in multicultural and interfaith activities. All of these efforts are important educational and collaborative tools to be supportive of each other. And we've heard bits and pieces of this as well. There are national resources and organizations that are involved that provide educational materials and are there to support us in case our community is a victim of a hate crime. ADL, which Robert represents, the Anti-Defamation League, is a prime example. Another one that we rely upon is the Secure Community Network. It is a more recent organization that's developed in the last 10 years or so that provides updates on daily incidences that have occurred or threats that they've heard about that could impact us. I work closely with them in the synagogue that I was at in Scottsdale. As things occurred, they would provide webinars about security training and things that we could do as a community to enhance the security to help prevent attacks. This organization is made up of law enforcement and security professionals. This is an organization that is supported directly from gifts to our annual campaign that get allocated through the Jewish Federations of North America. And I think it's going to be mentioned, but I will provide the reminder or announcement tonight on CNN at 9 o'clock is a program called Rising Hate, Anti-Semitism in America. Thank you.
Last but certainly not least, I have the pleasure of introducing Rabbi David Searle of Augusta Synagogue, where he has been the spiritual leader of the synagogue since 2003. He's been involved in so many activities across the community and things such as the Jewish War Veterans, the Jewish Historical Society, Rotary International. He is certainly a man of many talents. One we might say, we might refer to him as a Renaissance man. He's even authored a book, And You Shall Teach Your Children. He's a singer, a golfer, an author, and rumor has it that he has the lowest handicap of any rabbi in the history of Augusta playing golf. I heard that a little earlier today. We'll have to do some follow-up to see if that really is the case. But he's a pleasure to have in our community, and the best thing is he is the moral compass of our Jewish Museum Board. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Rabbi Searle to the podium.
Ditto and amen. So, of course, we wrap up with the rabbi who's accustomed to speaking in front of groups of people, but tends to be a little preachy, so I apologize in advance for that. But I am honored and pleased to be here today for a couple of reasons. For one, I'm just so proud of what we have become. I'm extremely encouraged, having witnessed this dream of the Augusta Jewish Museum becoming a reality, the reality that it is today. Are our doors open for business and profit? No. Is that what we're really all about anyway? No. We stand for many things, too many things to address in 5 minutes or so, but we'll get there soon, and I think that you're going to be impressed. But community and educational programs are among our primary objectives, which we are already providing and have been offering for a year or so already. So the Augusta Jewish Museum Board has much to be proud of today, but at the same time, we still have to be cautious and concerned and aware because of the hate. And it just seems that it never dies. As the rabbi on the panel, I'll just touch upon anti-Semitism for a minute. It has existed in our world through much of history, reaching its horrendous climax with the Holocaust. And of course, telling that story will be a significant component of our museum. After the Holocaust, the hatred died down for a while, particularly in the West. Hatred of Jews continued in some parts of the world. Today it's coming back with full force, even in the Western world. Often it's manifested with actions against Israel or Zionism. Speakers from Israel are heckled or shouted down by students. Professors from Israel are barred from academic conferences. Anti-Judaism on college campuses, as Nikki pointed out, is rampant. Jews are frightened to show their identity publicly. The hatred is real, and it's not coming. It's here. Sadly, hatred is often shown not just by others, but by Jews themselves. Yeah, we're divided all over the place. I'm laying the cards right on the table here, folks. There's a right wing and a left wing. There are liberals and progressives and Jews of every political party with issues that seriously divide us. And I know that it's the same for Christians and Muslims and most other peoples of faith. I think that a big part of the problem is that too often we do not see the humanity of the other. Is it inevitable that hatred will last forever? There are stories of anti-Semites who became fans of the Jews. There are stories of Jew haters who converted to Judaism. There are stories of hatred turned into love. It all begins when we see the humanity of the other. Our love is here to stay, but our hatred need not be here to stay. So thank you for coming today, and I hope that you've found some meaning in our program.
Thank you. It's been great hearing from all the panelists today. We want to take probably the next 20 minutes or so and take questions from the audience. I think Judy's going to go around with the microphone. So if anybody would raise their hand if they have any questions, and if there's a particular panelist that they would like to direct their question to, by all means, let them know. Judy.
My name is Oliver Brown, and I am being supported by Jewish community, by Rabbi Searle. My question is to Robert, Nikki, and David, just as well as Bobby and Eugene. And I just wanted to question that. How would you define, I know I can't relate, but how would you define racism now and prejudice now, or just being in the present other than the past, or black and white? Because I recently had a conversation with one of my coworkers when I used to work at the Y, and he's saying he grew up with black and whites hating each other, and I said, well, you got to get over that. Now it's a different type of racial prejudice out there, targeting anything like culture, targeting anything like personality, and people are trying to find the right way to take care of themselves in a proper society that seats them, not what you think you should be. You know what I mean? So how would, my question is, how would you identify racism and prejudice now?
Anybody on the panel want to take a crack?
So I'm sure there are a whole bunch of ways to answer that question. What I would point you to is what I asked him to hand out at the start, which is this pyramid of hate. And you know, this sort of gives us a roadmap that talks about how the foundation for hate is biased attitudes, and what some of those biased attitudes manifest themselves at. And when you've got people with biased attitudes, you start to see people with acts of bias, right? Acts of discrimination, right? Microaggressions. And then people, if that becomes widespread, you start to see systematic discrimination, right? Where the society itself is setting up inequities. And when that becomes a matter of acceptance, then you start to see violence, bias-motivated violence. And once that has reached its crescendo, you start to see genocide, right? So these things build on each other, and our job is to move everything down to the bottom and get rid of that bottom layer of bias so that you don't end up building all of the other forms of hatred that follow.
Any of our other panelists?
Maybe just one, I mean, that was a great answer, and definitely how I would have answered it. I think that one complicating thing that we have now is the issue of technology. Before, back in the 1600s, we didn't have telephones in our pockets to be able to get on Twitter and tweet, that sort of thing. But now, when at one point in time we had to get down in our little groups and make our plans and talk about how we hated and wanted to go against one group of people, now I can just pull my phone out of my pocket, log on to my social media site of choice, go into my room, and immediately send a message around the world. And then I'll get responses and likes that will affirm that behavior. And so now, as we think about it now, I think the game has changed and that the world has changed. It's become more of a global community. As I mentioned, I was at an event yesterday where we had all sorts of people getting together and dancing and sharing, which we wouldn't have had that 30 years ago in the form that we had, but at the same time now, we have this element of technology now. And to go even further now, it's even possible to make, with artificial intelligence, deep fakes where you can make a video of me doing anything and everything, and I'm, could be at home in my bed. So that technology piece, I think, is one thing that's kind of changed and has amplified this game of hate. But I think the contrary to that, Ben, is that, as people, we want to do the right thing, that the best way to combat hate is with good and with love. And so the same fervor that we're tweeting out these sorts of things that divide us, then, as people who want to have one community, then, let's govern ourselves accordingly as we develop our social media presences as well.
Do we have any other questions in order?
If you ain't never experienced hate, you looking at a man right now that will experience hate. I mean, when I say hate, I didn't hate the white folks. I hated the Augusta Police Department. I hated it. But it took God, right? I'm gonna tell y'all right today. It will take God to move that hate from you. I had a reason to it. In 1970, my brother got killed by Augusta Police Department. Because we had one of the baddest riders here in Augusta, Georgia. And my brother was one of the peacemakers. And he was on his way down here to the same courthouse. He was part of the march, and he was a part of the background. He was a part of the march. They were from march from here to the jailhouse at Savannah. And on the way trying to get here, 3 white police officers came around the corner. Didn't find no shots. And my brother Quinn told my brother to run. And my brother stayed there. If he didn't do no wrong, he wasn't running. He refused to run, and he got shot 8 times. He got shot 3 in the arm and 5 in the leg. And after they gunned him down, now this is what you call hatred. It took me time to figure that out, but by the district attorney brought it out. After they gunned my brother down, they drug him in the road. Mom had to put a veil over his cast on his face and that stuff. And the poor with my hatred shot in. After they gunned him down, they drug him. They threw him on the trash pile. After the trash pile, one of the white officers went back and kicked him in the head after the knee. And we were trying to figure out why they kicked him in. But I'm telling y'all today, if you ain't never experienced it, if you will, get on your knees and give it to God. Because it's tough, God, to move that. And the reason why God had to move that from me, I came a pastor over the years. And I know my God be not tired of it. And that's why I'm able to love each and everybody. Because Jesus first loved me. And that gave me the right to love. What I'm saying is that we're going to have to come together. And we're going to have to move this hate out of the way. Because we all here for a reason. And God, the only one who got that answer. Why we all here. It ain't no big you, ain't no little you. We all in this thing together. Thank you.
I've got an online question that I think is addressed to our DA, Bobby Christine. It says, so under state law, a hate crime cannot be prosecuted? I think this follows up on what Bobby was saying earlier about the crime enhancers.
A crime motivated by hate certainly can be prosecuted. What I would clear up, and I think speaks to the question, is that Georgia's hate crime statute is a sentence enhancer. You don't see in an indictment one is charged with hate crime. No. Charged with the underlying offense. If the jury or trier of fact convicts of that offense, then the jury comes back in and hears evidence of what the prosecutor believes was the motivation. And if the motivation was that they were targeting a particular group because of ethnicity or religion or membership in a group that is defined by perhaps a handicap or a limitation, then the judge, if the jury believes that is the motivation, can add additional punishment. I'd like to go back to what the young man mentioned in the back and couple what my peer panelist Eugene was saying. The difference is, and what we would call in the service, what Eugene described, is that the bad actors are networked. And that is an ominous thing. But what should we become? We should become networked also. It's not just what the ADL can do. It's not just what the NAACP can do. It's not just what the organizations here at the AJM can do. It's what can we do together? And that sounds so simple. But when we got on the ground in numerous conflicts over American history, we were facing multiple allied bad guys. You know, the Axis power. They were networked. And how were they defeated? They weren't defeated by the Russians. They weren't defeated by the English. They weren't defeated by the Americans. They were defeated by an allied network. So that's how you fight a network. I beg you to think about the purveyors of hate as working in concert. They are networked. And we doggone better become networked if we're going to put up a fight.
I think we've got a question in the back. Oh, okay.
There was one thing I was talking to Mike about. I was wanting to say one thing, and it would be appropriate for everybody to hear this. There is a song that Donna Ross used to sing, Reach speak up. Don't be afraid. We're not afraid. You may not know Hitler stole the swastika from us, but how many people, male or female, got blamed for it? We hear it, we feel it. Don't stop. This is the second program that nothing has been said about Indian, but everybody got a little drop of Indian blood in them somewhere. Stand up before it's too late. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Coco. I'm from Mexico. I'm sorry if I don't speak very well. I'm sorry if I don't speak very well English. I try about something, but for me, it got me in this section. This is about, you say, the violence started in homes. I was a teacher in Mexico for 20 years. I have my experience in this kind of situation. We brought in the school about we made programs about these kids because they coming a lot behaviors in language and physical and mental, because the parents, they are the middle of the kids. See, your kid, they saw you say something, they go in the school. See, the kids, they saw you make something, they go in the school. Everything the parents, they do in homes, we are in the school. Because the teachers, we all the time, we have a lot of situations, either with the parents, because we try to stay equal in our communities. We have a lot of natives in Mexico, and you never imagine how much the natives now is in trouble. But now is she's a native and he's before me, and they speak now, and they have programs now in his language. And the one thing is about his language, because they don't understand Spanish. They understand dialects. In my community, a lot of people, we don't find programs in the United States and universities for speaking, learn English. Except here in Columbia County, they have one lady I'm very proud of her, because she made a program voluntarily for citizens and speak English. I spoke about that one because our kids, they need help in the schools. Our parents, they need help for programs in the school. We don't know how I work, for example, with my kids. I'm Catholic, my husband is Jewish, and I involve both my kids, I involve in both religions, because I'm the parent, they said, okay, see, you involved in both religions, they know how were the community and Jewish people, how were the community and Catholic people, how were in my community in Mexico, how they were in my language, how the food I eat. The food I eat now, they said, why you eat beans in the morning? Why you do that? Why? Because the kids, they don't know about our food.
Hi, my name is, don't fall down. My name is Kent Livingston, and this question is not particularly about love or hate, but I would just like to address this question to the Rabbi Searle. Sometimes in the Jewish scriptures, the nation of Israel is referred to as Jacob, which was his name before it was changed to Israel. My question is simply this: is that still a practice in the present century, referring to the nation of Israel as Jacob?
I wouldn't say commonly, but there's not anything inappropriate about it, and there are other ways of referring to the nation of Israel as well that are also appropriate. Matter of fact, the name of our congregation is another term that was used in the Bible to describe, that God used to describe the children of Israel in an endearing way. So that's another uncommon way of describing them. So in short, it's not commonly used, but there's not anything inappropriate about it.
Thank you. We have a question from the online, and then we'll take one more question from the audience, and then we will move over to the AJM Education Center across the parking lot, and the panelists will be there to be able to continue the discussion. But these are awesome questions, and I encourage us all to continue this forum ongoing. The question from the chat is, what will need to be done to pass an actual hate crime bill, statute, or whatever it should be called? Who wants to answer that? Hate crime bill in Georgia, I presume. I don't know if South Carolina. Okay, the question is, what will need to be done to pass an actual hate crime bill, statute, or whatever it's called?
So that would be up to the legislative body, whether that's in South Carolina or Georgia, or whether you're seeking to do it federally. An excellent example, the rabbi asked me, he said, someone came in here and started spewing propaganda, did a Nazi salute, that sort of imagery comes to mind. What that person would have done, I would argue, is an invitation to violence, perhaps putting some of us in fear of receiving a violent injury, and that's what we in Georgia call a simple assault. So he would then be prosecuted for that assault. Then I would argue that his motivation was based upon the commonality of the folks in the room. The reason he came here and didn't go to Costco and start doing the Nazi salute is because he knew that the community was here. If he's motivated to commit his assault by hate, then his sentence can be enhanced. And so that's what the legislature has given us, and I think my friend from the ADL said it well. It highlights that it's not merely that assault, it's that assault motivated by hate. And so his punishment could be enhanced, and that's what our statute is.
Thank you. Another question online, and then we have two more from the audience, and then we could go all night, but this is reminiscent of when we had a talk back with the play Ann and Emmett, where at 10:30 p.m. we said, let's continue the conversation at another point. So we will end sometime today in a few minutes. One of the speakers talked about educating students. Does the parental rights bill passed by the Georgia legislature negate or limit the ability of educators to do this, educating students? Who wants to take that one?
I don't actually feel qualified to answer that question, so that's my caveat. My understanding is that the Parents' Bill of Rights codifies an opportunity for parents to withdraw their child from pieces of programming that they think is counter to their own upbringing. So if a No Place for Hate program were introduced into a public school here, and they decided that there were particular things they were going to do to try and combat bullying or to have acceptance for the LGBTQ community or whatever it was, that a parent could indicate that they didn't want their child to participate in that, and that they have the right to do. That doesn't give them the right to say that the school can't have such a program. Right? So that if a school does decide that they have a problem with bullying or they want to increase understanding of diversity or inclusion, they're certainly free to do that, and we hope that everybody would choose to participate, but a parent does have the right, I think, to have their child excluded if they'd like. So I think that answers the question.
Hi, it's Robin Brinkman. I have a question on the education in the schools. as, how does that work in terms of approach when there are incidents in the school? And how does that work? We all know it's how kids are brought up, and of course, a lot of kids come to school and they have not been exposed to other ethnic groups until they attend school. So how do you approach that?
So I think there are several things that you do when you start this dialogue. And one of them is to get people to recognize biases and prejudices that exist. And another is to get people to understand in what ways they are privileged by the society in which other people might not be privileged. And the third way is to help people understand that not all of the things that might create differences are visual, right? They're not all evident, right? This isn't just about skin color, right? It may be about disability. It may be about sexual orientation. There's any one of a number of ways that we are alike or we are different. And so what you do in schools is you get students to start, and there's teacher training so that the teacher knows how to facilitate the discussion. But you get teachers involved with getting kids to start thinking about and talking about these things so they can recognize when maybe the society or the television set or the dinner table have given them a predisposition for something that we want them to give hard thought to.
I'm speechless, no. I know that you may be having more questions. Are there any other questions from the chat? Elena?
No.
Okay. Let's wrap up by thanking our panelists for being here today. And as a thank you from the Augusta Jewish Museum, they will be getting a print drawn by local artist Donna Whaley of the old historic synagogue. And we also have note cards. All of these are available in our online store at the AugustaJewishMuseum.org. And you are now welcome to either exit from here or out the front to the Augusta Jewish Museum Education Center. Is there anything else that we needed to talk about? Yeah, thank you, Judy Geary. Thank you to the volunteers. And I think someone did mention tonight at 9 p.m. there is a program on CNN on anti-Semitism, and it's highly relevant for all of us. But we heard from a Native American Indian, we've heard from Hispanics, we heard from Mr. Walter from the African American community, and I might add that at the Augusta Mini Theater, there is a wonderful exhibit now, a permanent exhibit of the Augusta 1970 riot, and much of what he spoke about is included in that exhibit. So I encourage you to continue the conversation. Thank you so much.
I just want to say one thing. These programs would not have happened if it wasn't for Robin Dudley.
Thank you. Please pay the security guard. And thank you to the security